People sometimes have a problem saying, what I want is X, and aiming high. And they almost negotiate with themselves before they open the bidding and end up asking for less than what they'd originally thought they might ask for when they were planning. So the rule here is to absolutely ask for what you want in the first stage of the negotiation when you're bidding. Aim high, because normally speaking, the more you ask for, the more you get. So if you're a buyer, the less you offer, the less you have to pay. And if you're a seller, the higher the price you ask for, the more you're going to get. So aim high is the first rule of bidding. Don't negotiate with yourself. And the second rule of bidding is you only need one good reason to support what you're saying. So what tends to happen is when people bid, they give 10 reasons to support their particular bid, and the other side stops listening after the first 2 or 3 and then picks up on the 10th one, which is normally the weakest one, dives into that and demolishes it, and then ignores all the other reasons. So giving 10 good reasons to support what you're saying isn't really helpful to you, and it's quite wasteful. So one good reason to support your bid, pick that reason, make your bid, sit back, see what happens. It's tempting to feel when you're an individual that the other side has more bargaining power than you do. When we're working within the bosom of a big company, it's a bit easier to feel as though we carry the weight of the company with us, and that gives us a bit more negotiating authority. But as an individual, I would say that you always have your personal power as a negotiator. So the more you understand attitude, process, effective behaviour, the better off you'll be. And if you've marshalled all of those skills and you understand how they work and you've practiced them, you're very likely to have an advantage over someone who hasn't thought about those things at all. So you marshal your personal power as a negotiator, and don't be afraid to either bring in experts or bring in sources of additional bargaining power other than yourself in order to support what you're doing. So the bids are all on the table, and there's a gap, isn't there, between what I want and what you said you want, and this is where we get into the bargaining phase, which is all about closing that gap and working out how we can meet on some common ground. So if the earlier stages of the negotiation have gone right, I should be aware of certain needs that you have in the negotiation, and you'll be aware of certain things that I need. And those are not so much organisational needs around, price or quantity or delivery dates. They're more around personal drivers like achievement needs or respect needs or a sense of belonging or a need for reassurance or security. And what the skillful negotiator does is during the exploration phase, works out what the needs are on both sides. And then during the bargaining phase, he deploys concessions in order to meet the other side's needs and get what he wants in return. And that's really the knack of successful bargaining. Identify the needs on each side and work out the concessions that you can afford that help meet those needs going both directions. The 4 possibilities for behaviour are push, pull, join and part. So if someone's being very pushy with you, you can push them back straight away and you can say, I negotiate on the basis of reason, not threats. Shall we start again? That would be a push way of dealing it. Or you could deal with it in a pull behaviour sort of way, which is much more focused on the other side, and much more gentle, which would be more like, I'm feeling there's quite a lot of hostility in the room. Why don't we put that to one side and see if we can get off on a better foot? Or you could deal with it in a joint behaviour sort of way, which is all about a shared agenda. So you could say, just imagine how much better this negotiation will go if neither of us is threatening the other. Or you could use passing behaviour, which takes your energy out of the negotiation, and just call for a break. and say, I think we need to have a 5-minute break now, and when I come back, we can start again without you pushing me. And that will probably put an end to it, because what all of those tactics have in common is that they show the other side that you know what they're doing. And since most push behaviour is tactical on the other side, once you make it obvious that you know what's going on, they'll normally drop the tactic. People select different behaviours for different negotiations. People who are win-losers, who are only interested in a win for themselves and not in a win for you, tend to be very pushy in their behaviour, very I-centric, all about what I want, what I need, what I require, and you'll pick that up very quickly in the early stages of a negotiation. And if you do pick it up quickly, then the time to address it is right at the beginning, before they get comfortable with that kind of attitude and behaviour, and it then dominates the rest of the discussion. There's a difference, isn't there, between climate setting and actually getting to the haggle. So during the climate setting phase, it's fine to be warm and friendly and talk about last night's football and be the most charming person in the world, and all that can be very, very productive and helpful in creating the right atmosphere. At the point at which you start bidding and bargaining, the thing to remember is it doesn't really matter if the other person doesn't like you, just at that moment. Okay? All that matters at that moment is that they believe you mean what you say and that they're going to have to give you a win. So at that point, all that bonhomie becomes less important than it might be earlier in the negotiation when you're trying to get things off on the right foot. Because if you've done all the hard work on the relationship prior to the point at which you start bidding and bargaining, it ought to be able to withstand a bit of push and shove when you go and do the hard stuff of the negotiating. It doesn't all have to be coy and gentle all the way through. If the negotiation is just not going well, I always recommend taking a break. No one can ever reproach you for suggesting, in all honesty, look, it's not going as well as we thought. Why don't we just take 15 minutes and just separate and see if we can come back refreshed and re-energise and try and move it forward again. And that gives you time to go away and reflect and get creative or think about new ways through the problems that are causing roadblocks for you. So I think that's one answer if things aren't going well. The other answer goes back to your planning. So if you've worked out your bottom line in the planning phase and what's on offer is worse than your bottom line, then you really ought to be walking away, and that oughtn't to be a source of disappointment or discomfort. You ought to be congratulating yourself on sticking to your negotiating discipline and not giving away more than you'd intended to. One way of setting a bottom line is to know what your best alternative to a negotiated agreement is at the outset. What would I do if I can't get a deal done with this person? And if what's on offer at the end of the day is worse for you than your best alternative, well, you'd be a fool not to take the best alternative. There are other sources of bargaining power as well, which you can make sure you have ranged on your side. For example, information. When you hear people talk about information is power, so the more information you've got available, the better off you'll be in the deal-making process. Expertise is a source of bargaining power, so make sure you know your stuff, or you've got some experts ranged alongside you who can help provide that expertise. Referral power is a kind of bargaining power that people speak of sometimes, which means having someone else in authority outside the dynamic of the negotiation that you can refer to as being part of your team. So even though they're not in the negotiation, they're there in the background having an influence. Might be a highly influential senior entrepreneur or a non-exec director or a whole non-exec board that you can refer to as being in the background, which adds extra weight to your side of the deal. So really important to marshal your bargaining power when you're dealing with funders and investors.